Hi, I'm Christian Brindle, and welcome to the Everything Medicare Podcast. What's up, Everything Medicare Podcast Nation? This is episode 142. Thank you so much for joining me wherever you are and however you might be listening, coming to you just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, cold Salt Lake City, Utah, as I bring you this episode on a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, folks. Hope it was relaxing. Hope you got a ton of things done you wanted to get done if you were so inclined. And thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy Monday to join me to talk a little bit about your Medicare, your Medicaid, your Social Security, and everything that has to do with that golden age called retirement. Today, folks, we're going to be talking about what's known as special enrollment periods. Okay. What special enrollment periods are is they are time periods that you can change your particular Medicare health plan without it being the annual election period, also known as AEP for short. Basically, it's the Medicare enrollment period. And there are certain situations that people qualify for from time to time to which they're able to change their plan outside of the enrollment period. It's not always, enrollment period or bust, if you will. Now, let me preface my comments by saying if you have a Medicare supplement plan, like a Plan F, a Plan G, a Plan N, et cetera, this does not apply to you. The reason I say that is because you can change your Medicare supplement plan year-round. These plans are month to month. You can change your Medicare supplement plan every month of the year if you wanted to. Now, I wouldn't recommend it, but hypothetically speaking, you could. The only qualifications to change your Medicare supplement plan from one insurance company to another is you have to be able to pass that new insurance company's health questions and underwriting requirements. So this doesn't apply to Medicare supplements. You got to keep in mind that Medicare supplements are a totally different world. We're going to be, for the most part, talking about Medicare Advantage plans because they're the kind of plans that really lock you in. Okay. So, folks, I was at home this weekend and I was spending time with our daughter, Violet. For those of you who've been listening to us for some time, Violet is 8 months old. So she was born in May of 2019. I talked about it quite a bit on the podcast because this podcast is not just about Medicare. It's also about my life. And I kind of talk to you about what's going on in my life as we go. And my wife and I have been having Violet kind of sleep in the bassinet. Okay. We had a pack and play for her, but she just hates it. She won't sleep in it. Okay. And the pack and play is much bigger than the bassinet, but she won't sleep in the pack and play. And we're new parents. We're learning as we go. All of you that have had children can sympathize with that for your first kid. You don't really know what you're doing all the way until you've gone through it one time around. And that's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. So we've had her been sleeping in the bassinet in our room. And I was at the office last week. And I was talking to, one of our staff, my assistant, and about it. And, she's got several kids. She's been a mom for a long time. And she was like, "You don't have her sleeping in her crib yet on her own at 8 months? Oh my gosh, you're going to create a monster." And that freaked me out. That terrified me because I was like, oh no, because you always hear about kids growing up being too dependent on their parents, right? And that's instantly where my mind went. And it's not something that I thought about. The original plan was we were going to gradually ease her into her own room and her crib. Okay, I bought her crib before she was born. I put it together myself. It was one of those things you buy at Walmart. You put it together yourself. I think it was like $150, maybe $200. I don't remember exactly. But we've had it. It's a nice crib. It's perfect. But when you're a new parent, you're worried about everything. you fear change when it comes to your child. And my wife and I have kind of found ourselves struggling with this transition as we try to get her adapted to her own room. And we've been trying to do it gradually, first start out by doing naps in there and also putting us in a position where, we can get more comfortable with it. But we struggle with change on this because it's our first child. We don't know kind of what to expect. And of course, it's silly, right? In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. It's not a big deal, but everything is a big deal when you're a new parent. If you've been a parent, you understand that the first time around is a big deal. You worry about everything, every little, scratch or scrape. You're terrified about it. I told a story on the podcast a little while ago, maybe a couple months back, where we took Violet to the emergency room for nothing. Nothing. And I'm sure a lot of parents have done that. In fact, I know a lot of parents have done that. But the point being is when you have gone through a situation where you get used to something that's naturally uncomfortable for you by nature. It could be raising your first child, or it could be having your first Medicare insurance plan, because I've seen a lot of people over the years come to us that have had a plan since they became eligible. They signed up for this plan. They've had it for 10 years, especially on the Medicare Advantage side, but Medicare supplements too. Because the Medicare supplement plans go up in price every year, and the price increases could make it completely uncompetitive. And they just stay on this plan because it's comfortable. And the thought of changing this plan to something else, even if there's something else better, is scary to them. Okay. The reason why I bring this up is because it's very applicable with what we're talking about here. Because if you are on a plan that you could potentially do better on somewhere else, and you qualify for one of these special enrollment periods that we're going to be talking about, it's just like me and my wife getting our daughter to sleep in her crib and having her sleep in her crib at night. It's scary. It's a little nerve-wracking. You're uncomfortable with it. You don't necessarily know how it's going to go, but at some point you have to do it. And it's what's best for all of us. It's what's best for her as she develops into her own little person. And it's what's best for us to get our bedroom back. So think about this. Equate changing your plan if you've never changed it before, something that you're very comfortable with, but it's probably not as good as you could be getting, to adapting to some kind of change when it comes to your first child. Because that's how I look at it. And I think there's a lot to do with this, okay? Don't go anywhere. I got to take a quick break, but I'll be back in segment 2, and we will discuss what these special enrollment periods are, how you qualify, how they work, and the whole 9 yards. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for sticking with me through that break. And I am fired up to talk about special election periods. I always hear people in the insurance community say that, people that work in the insurance industry, and they say, well, no one really cares to talk about the ins and outs of the insurance except for people that are working with the insurance. Meaning the consumers don't really want to know this stuff. And I say this podcast debunks that argument. This podcast shows that argument is complete nonsense, because we have a huge audience that comes each and every week to kind of learn stuff that can help them use their plan best and maximize their Medicare and squeeze every little drop they can out of it. And I think a lot of people really can benefit by knowing some of the ins and outs that don't get talked about enough. And special election periods, special enrollment periods, whatever you want to call them, SEPs for short, are things that can benefit you, knowing when you really can change and when you can't. So let's jump right into that. So we talked about in segment 1 about how the Medicare supplements work, right? They're month to month. You can change any time of the year. So this doesn't apply to that. But if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, there are certain situations where you may be able to change throughout the year. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is Medicare Advantage plans are based on the area at which you live in. And if you live in a relatively large state like a Texas or California or Florida, there may be different Medicare Advantage plans on one side of the state than there will be on the other side. And they call these service areas. Typically, a service area could make up an entire state, or a service area could make up a couple of counties within the state. But a service area is basically the area at which that particular Medicare Advantage plan is offered. So if you move out of the service area, well, guess what? You can't keep that Medicare Advantage plan anymore for long. They give you about 60 days from the time of the move, from the time they're notified of the move, actually. And you have that time period to pick a new plan. And if you don't, you'll be terminated. And you'll have just regular Medicare. Okay? So there is a special enrollment period for moving out of your old plan service area, to which you can pick up a new Medicare Advantage plan any time of the year in the new place that you move. So that's the number. That's the first one. Moving out of your service area. They call it they call it moving out of the service area, quite plain. The other one is if you have Medicaid or low income subsidy or extra help or something of that nature, and you have a Medicare Advantage plan, or maybe you have a special needs plan, they grant you a time period where once every quarter of the year, for the first 3 quarters of the year, you can make changes. You can change from one Medicare Advantage plan to another, or one special needs plan to another, but you can only do it once per quarter. Okay? So that's if you have low income subsidy through your state or Medicaid, or something along those lines. Okay? If you just got out of prison, there's a special election period for that. It's true. I'm not joking. If you just got out of prison, there's a special election period for that. If you've just gone into an assisted living facility or nursing home, there's a special enrollment period for that. There is also OEP, which goes from January 1st to March 31st, which is basically the time period when any person, regardless of if you have any life-changing events, have a Medicare Advantage plan, you can change to go to original Medicare with a supplement and a drug plan one time, or you can go to another Medicare Advantage plan one time. That's looked at as the second Medicare enrollment period, but insurance companies aren't allowed to advertise about it. Neither are we as brokers. But that's technically looked at as a kind of special election period. If you're coming off of work insurance, let's say you took Medicare, but you kept your work insurance or your retirement plan or something along those lines, there's a special election period for coming off of your work insurance. That's technically considered a life-changing event. And there's so many of these folks, but you just have to keep in mind that you may qualify for one of these life-changing events if you go through some kind of change throughout the year. And don't get me wrong. Just because you go through a change doesn't mean you should change just to change. But if there's a situation out there that presents itself an opportunity for you to upgrade your coverage, you need to take advantage of that and use the special election periods. Don't go anywhere, folks. I have some final thoughts I'd like to share on this topic, but I have to take a quick break and hear from this week's sponsor. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back, and I will share my final thoughts. Stay right where you are. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for sticking with me all the way to the end. Folks, there are so many SEPs that it would take me too long than I want this episode to go for me to go through them all. But just know there are life-changing events, and I wanted to give you some examples of some. Moving out of your service area is a life-changing event. Having Medicare and Medicaid is a life-changing event. Getting on Medicaid for the first time, getting off of Medicaid, let's say you lose your eligibility, is a life-changing event. Coming off of your work insurance is a life-changing event. Going in and out of assisted living and nursing home facilities are life-changing events. Coming out of prison is a life-changing event. Let's say you go on a mission. Let's say you're part of a religious organization. I live here in Utah, so we have that happen all the time because, Utah's obviously the home state of Mormons. So there's a lot of clients we have that are Mormons that end up going on missions out of the country. So what do? They put their Medicare in what's known as dormant status. So they don't have to keep paying for it when they're not here, because the insurance they're provided by the church will cover them overseas or out of the country, but Medicare will not. So when they come back, that's a life-changing event. There's a lot of different things here we can look at. Someone can continue working on their work insurance. We've talked about this in prior episodes, but I thought it'd be important to talk about. Someone can continue working on their work insurance, and if they're provided coverage through their current employer, they don't have to take Medicare at 65. They can postpone it. Now, I usually recommend taking Part A because it doesn't cost anything, and it's a little tough to get on it later. It's just easier to take it at 65, but they can postpone their Medicare Part B with no penalties until they either lose that plan or retire. So when someone postpones their Part B and they take it later, that's a life-changing event. So there's a lot of different ways we can do it here. You can not only get on and off during the Medicare enrollment period on your current plan. There's a lot of different situations that you can make a change, even if you think you can't. It never hurts to check and see if you qualify for some kind of special election period. Thanks so much for listening, folks. I really hope you got a lot out of this episode. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, if you've been listening to us from the beginning, I encourage you, please do us a favor. Whatever platform you might be listening to us on, please leave us a 5-star review and mention what you've liked and enjoyed about the podcast up until this point. It helps us reach more people just like you on whatever platform you might be listening to. And there are millions of people out there that need to hear this information that are just lost and confused. My mission is to reach as many of those people as possible and clear up this information. What I've noticed is our listeners know more about Medicare than anybody else. Facts. That is the truth. That is a straight fact. Because they're educated, they're informed, they know what they need to be looking for, they know the good and the bad of both sides, and they don't just buy into some propaganda. There's propaganda out there for everything. There's propaganda telling you that Medicare Advantage is evil. It's not. There's propaganda out there telling you that Medicare supplements are evil. It's not. Both of them have a place. Don't buy into propaganda, and I know that our audience doesn't do that. So do us a favor, leave us a review if you haven't done so already. It really would mean the world to me. And as always, if you'd like to check and see if you qualify for any of these special election periods, maybe you're not sure if you're getting the most out of your plan at the moment, feel free to contact our office. Our number is 801-255-5340, 801-255-5340. We are currently licensed to work with you if you live in the states of Utah, Texas, Florida, South Carolina, Idaho, Oregon, and Colorado. Again, that is Utah, Texas, Florida, South Carolina, Oregon, Idaho, and Colorado. Those are our 7 states. We're going to be adding more states soon, so stay tuned for that. And as always, folks, have a wonderful rest of your day. We will be back with you with another episode on Wednesday. Take care.